Hello and welcome to Erupt, the home for how businesses can scale and transform. Throughout this podcast, we aim to inspire and educate to help you and your business thrive. Across the course of our episodes, we'll be interviewing industry leaders to uncover some of the challenges across the world of work. We aim to give an insight into some of the fastest growing organisations across HR and technology. Please follow us on our journey to erupt and elevate your business. In today's episode, we had a conversation about the opportunities and threats of digitalisation with Syreeta Brown, who is CPO at Virgin Money, and Marcelo Borges, who is an organisational effectiveness director at Alter Domus.
We're going to be talking about the opportunities and threats of digital. Digital is one of these really interesting words, isn't it? So we're going to talk about how digital means to evolve as a business, not just, how digital means to evolve as a business, but also as a differentiator, competitive differentiator that challenger organizations now use as a selling point, as a USP. We're going to talk about how organizations and industries have had to rapidly adapt to embrace digital. It's been a theme that we've covered a lot this morning, and the impact of how we can make the use of it and what might happen if we don't embrace it, how we take the people in our businesses on that journey. Look, guys, as you know, been looking forward to this. It's so fantastic to have you here. Let's get started and let's talk about this word digital, because it means a lot of different things to different people. I think it's fair to say. What does digital mean to you? So, Syreeta, do you want to start? What does that mean to you, and what should it mean maybe to everybody?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I've been having this discussion in terms of my old company and my new company, and James, you'll know I've worked a lot on it. And I feel like digital can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. For me, basically, it's the way we now operate, both socially and in business on technology platforms is the simplest way I can put it. And I like to be simple about digital because it can sound like this really sexy word and I think sometimes people want it to be deliberately opaque and mysterious, but that's basically what it is. It's the evolution of our interaction as human beings, from social, from business, to leisure, through technology platforms. And in the work I've certainly done in the HR sphere around business, it's really been looking at our processes and our strategies about how we engage people, how we manage people, develop people, increasingly using technology platforms as an enabler to do that. Digital is not the point, though. I'm a big believer, and you'll know this, James, digital for me is either the enabler or the byproduct, but it services a bigger purpose. And that's where I think sometimes people, they get too into the word digital and less into what are we actually trying to achieve, or what is it we're trying to do? So that's what it means for me.
Yeah, I think that word purpose is really interesting. We'll probably talk more about that. Marcelo, what does digital mean to you?
Yeah, no, it's just really, really interesting listening to Syreeta, and I absolutely agree. I think sometimes we can really come across as overcomplicating. I think it's all about interactions, either internally, with your employees, or external with your clients. I think for us, James, within AD, it's an absolutely critical part of our strategy. It's one of our 5 pillars. And the way in which we apply that is really thinking about our client value proposition. So, what is the type of experience that we're looking to create for our clients, and how can digital, again, a word used by Syreeta there, enable that. That digital as an enablement is absolutely critical. But of course, that external client value proposition can only really be driven if your internal employer value proposition is also spot on. And we're also looking at digital as a way to really drive our employer value proposition.
Sure. Now, you both worked in biggest corporate organizations out there. I think you probably describe both the organizations that you're working for, and sorry to the one you're going to, as challenger, really exciting sort of brands with scaling mission. Do you see, from what your experience, that working a different size sort of organizations may be a different sort of opportunity and threat, and how would you use that to differentiate maybe your proposition to future and current employees in maybe both sorts of environment? Syreeta, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think size. I was just having a conversation just an hour ago around something like this theme. Size size is relevant in terms of context, most definitely. But for me, the challenges, the threats, the opportunities, they're almost the same because. And I'll take my experience in a big organization, you know, which has had huge investment in talking about City here, huge investment around culture and digital technologies. But just because you bring these things in doesn't mean they're going to work. And there's some parallel work that needs to happen, whether it's a big organization or a small organization. And linked to the point that you know we made earlier just now, purpose is really important. What are we trying to do here? Because I've seen examples where we bring in big technologies and the culture almost has an organ rejection of it because it's changing the way and challenging the way we work or we make decisions or we deliver propositions to customers. And it may threaten, for want of a better word, the status quo of how people get things done. And people find comfort and security in that. So there's huge culture work around this type of word of digital technology that I think sometimes gets neglected. And that can apply in both a small and a large organization. Now, a larger organization has more scale to absorb the impact of that. So it may not go as noticed. A smaller organization, it will be very visible and very quickly. And so I think there's more responsibility and accountability for smaller organizations to get it right, to really be thoughtful quickly about what does digital technologies mean for our organization and our strategy, and what are we hoping to achieve, and how much is it going to be? I mean, affordability is a big thing for smaller organizations because there's less fat to absorb perhaps things not working or iterations. You know, any digital strategy is a huge capital expenditure and it never goes the way you want it to go. We all know that. There's always unforeseen things, and so you need to have a lot of capital. And I think for me, the biggest difference is having the capacity to manage the never-ending changes around digital platforms and technologies, and ensuring you have continuous investment. A lot of people want to be digital, but don't want to pay and understand what that, you know, the buy side of that is that it costs, you know, continuously. So you've constantly got to be innovating and optimizing how you work with the technology so it delivers its return. In a bigger organization, I think you have more runway for it to not necessarily work on day one.
Thank you. Marcelo, what do you think?
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. I think, you know, we all have seen cases, right, that someone brings in a new piece of kit and throws that piece of kit at the organization, expect it to stick, and it just doesn't. You know, if you don't really treat it with the proper project management care, with the proper change management care, and I think, you know, the two other aspects of it is, I think the cultural aspect of this is massive. You know, not ignoring the culture of the organization and how we move the culture. In one of my previous organizations, I remember, you know, this big speech about we're going to digitize, and would bring great talent in the organization to understand, you know, to do that. And before we knew, talent were exiting the organization because the culture didn't allow them to drive the innovation that they were brought in, you know, to do in the first place. I think we moved away from those times. I think there's now a far bigger acceptance. And I think the important thing here is don't lose sight of your client. You know, so as you drive technology, what, you know, why are you doing this for? What is your reason? And how is this going to benefit your client? And of course, internally, your people. I think articulating that right at the start, it's incredibly important in that journey, James. I'm less preoccupied with the threats. I think, you know, I'm a big advocate of digital. I think, you know, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to evolve, and it's just going back to, you know, to the previous point. It's just the way in which we'll do things and we'll do things. So therefore, you know, we need to be thinking organizationally how to create the space for the technology to come in and to be embedded. I'm a big fan of product launch, you know, treating technology as a big product launch that is not just about going live and forgetting about it, you know, really thinking about all the different phases of that launch, the embedding of it, and the behavioral change aspect of it. I think that is absolutely critical.
Yeah, very much so. We've got our first question coming in from the audience. So maybe we'll just go across to that and just take that on. So this is coming from Amita Sandhu. Thanks, Amita. Does the age of digital mean we need new leadership skills? And if so, what are these new skills? I'll just repeat that to give you a bit of time to think about it. So does the age of digital mean that we need new leadership skills? And if so, what are these new skills? Do we need new leadership skills, Syreeta?
It's a really good question. I would say the age of digital is illuminating the leadership skills we don't probably have already. I think a lot of people call themselves leaders out there, and on the basis of what they may have done. And digital really requires you to be constant, and it goes to the point I just made about continuous improvement. It constantly requires you to be developing and honing the skills you have and maybe the skills you don't have. So in that sense, I think the new leadership skill that may be required is one that says you haven't done it all, that you start again every day. Every day you come in, it's new. That's different to our traditional concept of leadership skills, led big organizations, manage big teams, empathy, intuitiveness. The traditional skills, they are absolutely necessary, but I think there's an assumption that they already exist. And I think the digital environment is almost, if you just think about the last 18 months, it's surfacing the real people that really do have these skills, from the people that probably have relied on their experience and what they do more than how they do it. Working in a virtual world, I think, has challenged all of us and has brought out definitely a new leadership. I would say has surfaced the importance of certain leadership skills that probably weren't more at the forefront of people's minds when they were looking at leadership positions. The ability to connect without connecting, the ability to intuitively understand how to engage teams who aren't even, maybe have never met before around an agenda. These are very different interpretations of skills, I think, that we see in more traditional environments. And the digital, I think the pandemic has accelerated that philosophy of how we work, but I think it was always going to be coming anyway. I think that the last year has accelerated that. So I think, and I hate using this word, but softer skills, how people have seen leadership in a more softer environment. Forward thinking of us never saw it as soft skills. It's just the skills you need. But those, what I say is backseat driver skills that weren't really thought of as critical and now becoming more critical. But I do think it is also surfacing the fact that we haven't really focused on certain leadership skills that we should have been focusing on before.
Interesting. Marcelo?
Yeah, totally agree. I think, certainly, within Alter Domus, what we've noticed, we're an organization that is spread across, 3 different regions, 3,400 people is scattered around the globe. And, the leaders' ability to connect, the leaders' ability to drive cohesiveness, the leaders' ability to empathize over the last 18 months has been something that we had to work on, and we use, digital tools to support us with that, really understanding our level of engagement and equipping our leaders to do that too. But I think, the pandemic just maximized all of that, James. I totally agree with Syreeta here. I think leaders who have that natural ability to empathize and were able to actually listen, not just to the words, but is still able to read the body language behind the screen, were the ones that were able to continue driving their teams. So I think, not a new skill, right? The leaders' ability to empathize was there before, but actually within the context of pandemic, that was to a whole new level. And it was quite interesting because, at the beginning for us, there was a process of unlearning, even some of the leaders that were very good at having one-to-ones every week or having, weekly meetings every week. To start with, they kind of forgot to do that because, it was digital. So there was a process of, learning again how to be a leader within the context of the pandemic, which I found fascinating, really.
Thank you. How are your sort of organizations and industries, do you think, embracing digital over the pandemic? And is that happening more so, do you think, than they were beforehand? I suppose, Syreeta, obviously, this is from a city context. What do you think, Syreeta?
Yeah, I can talk for City and Virgin Money because I've been doing lots of research. But I would say in City, that the organisation was already on that curve of embracing digital, huge investment. Luckily, actually, because when the pandemic hit, it was able to respond very quickly and nimbly and in a very agile way to the different ways that we had to operate the organisation, both with clients, with employees, and with candidates, with people who hadn't yet joined. I mean, you know, you'll know, James, that the hiring volumes in City are immense. You know, and at any one time there could be anything from 10 to 15,000 open roles, and all of a sudden you had people stuck in parts of the world who couldn't start their job. But needed to start their job. You had people in certain parts of the world where physical on background screening was required, a legal requirement. You couldn't get anywhere to get fingerprints tested and things like that. So real basic fundamental things, but magnified given the volumes. And because of technology that was already in place and in situ, the organisation was able to respond really quickly to that. So I think I think the organisation was already preempting some of this stuff, but had the kit, had it ready. And I would say, from what I have seen at Virgin Money, that the same is true. I think the difference again is mindset. You know, going back to what Marcelo just said, it's not. You can have the kit, you can be ready, you can even go and buy it quickly. I mean, technology, to be fair, isn't that hard to get. You know, you can get it, but to your point, Marcelo, about product launch, if you don't have a continuous implementation, you know, mentality around technology, you will fall foul of it. And so I think that for both contexts, making sure that people understand and engage with why we're doing what we're doing, that they see the value in it as well. There's got to be a value exchange with digital technologies. If people don't see the value exchange, then it becomes redundant, and then we get the world of, and I don't know if Marcelo's experienced this, but manual workarounds. People find ways around things to go back to the way they like to work. That's really dangerous, because that's cost duplicative and it loses the efficiency of what you're trying to achieve.
Marcelo?
Yeah, it is really interesting. I just find, Syreeta, that normally, you know, the best preferred platform tends to be an Excel spreadsheet, right? If the technology has not been deployed well. So I think on our side, James, within our alternative investment, so the industry as a whole is absolutely seeing fintech, you know, smaller players entering the industry and entering the industry in a very strong way. So we're absolutely experiencing that. What we've seen as well is a whole range of new services and products entering the market, normally within the space of data management and analytics. So clients are really looking for insights and prepared to pay for that. New type of assets and digital currency, as you know, we all can see going on out there. And of course, data treated as a product and data monetization as well. So we're seeing that happening really fast within the industry. Similar to Syreeta, I think Alter Domus was already on that journey. Our existing strategy preceded the pandemic, but we certainly seen an acceleration. And I think probably we had to there was less of a sell during pandemic because people were experiencing the importance of it. Nevertheless, the importance of culture and the embedding is still there, right? That doesn't go away. So for us, the things that we've seen happening quicker for within internally within AD, we have an SAP transformation. So there's been a good acceleration of that, and also internally, from a HR perspective, having a global HR system, but also moving away from digital just in line with the employee experience and our big moments. Actually, more than that, really thinking of digital in the in the flow of work. I think that's the next step, right? It's not just about your once a year appraisal, or it's bigger than that. It's about thinking about the end-to-end employee experience and making sure that all the workflows and processes, whenever possible, we bring digital into it. I think the final thing that I would add in this space is, we all, and I'm sure you've been talking about that, James, over the last few days, the great resignation going on out there, right?
Yeah.
So, clearly talent at the moment is holding the power, and they are looking for jobs with meaning. So if you are bringing young talent to do what is perceived as being manual work, before you know, we're going to lose them. So using digital as we think about your job design is absolutely critical as well.
Thank you. Got another question that's come in from the audience from Sarah Davies about whether or not your company's already had a digital plan in place and the pandemic accelerated it, or did you have to come up with a new digital plan that you hadn't previously considered?
I mean, I think I started to answer that before, but there's a bit I'd add on to help with that question. Whilst I think City had a digital plan in place and was implementing it, what I call the take up of that plan, it were varied. You know, there were areas, and it's a big organisation. It's over 160 countries, very different jurisdictions and requirements when you're launching a digital strategy across the globe, especially in terms of regulatory, environment, governance, the bits people don't like to talk about, the unsexy part of digital implementation. It's not as straightforward. If you're in one country, one dimension, one vertical, it's straightforward. But if you're multi-jurisdictions, it's a nightmare. And sometimes the take-up philosophy, you know, the engagement and the adoption of the tool or the platform or whatever it is you're doing is slow or non-existent. What I saw with the pandemic is all of a sudden requirements that may have been required before all of a sudden disappeared, you know. Oh, yeah, because we need to get this business process working, or we need to keep these people onboarding, or we need to go and find talent. And all of a sudden, this mindset around barriers came down. And it was, well, how can we make it work? How can we adopt it? How can we manage some of the regulatory requirements? And you started to see more adoption, what I call adoption of the platforms and the tools as a result of the pandemic. And this is the difference between implementation and launch and actually delivering your technology or your platform. It is adoption is really important. So that's what I would say changed for City.
Marcelo?
Yeah, no, so similar actually. So the strategy was there. There was a plan in place. What the pandemic has done, it got us to fixate in the granular aspect of that strategy and to drive acceleration. I think the other thing that we've been doing over the last 6 months, and as part of org design, is to really think of our value chain and what aspects of that value chain can be digitized. Huge drive at the moment, James, in terms of what aspects of our client offering we can functionalize and we can centralize. And guess what? As soon as we start thinking functionalization and centralization, digital just becomes a big part of it. So again, I think the last 18 months just got us to fixate even more on those aspects, not losing sight of what we want to deliver to our clients. Internally, I think it's been really interesting. We all know parts of the HR agenda, such as learning and development, right? So development and L&D is something that I've worked with for many, many years, and it was interesting because digital learning at some point had difficulty to have some traction, and here we are, 2 days later, we all experiencing learning, either remote or digitally. And guess what? Most organizations that they speak to, they are not planning to go back, to full-time, face-to-face classroom type of programs. There will be a blend of some sort that will emerge. But clearly, I think certainly on the development space, we probably had 10 years of development crashed within 2 years as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, I suppose following on from that, we have this question about when it comes to embracing digital, the ramifications if we don't get the adoption right as individuals and as organizations. So you started to talk about that, but what is the cost, do you think, if this doesn't land?
I mean, it's huge. As I said, there should always be a business case around your digital strategy. And if you haven't got one, then it's a problem. But there should be ultimately a commercial return that you see and an outcome. And the downside is if you haven't got the adoption strategy right, you'll need more people. You'll need more people than you had probably thought you would need, because Marcelo mentioned the magic word, which I'm a big fan of, project management. When things either have to be implemented, iterated, or reworked, it requires very strong project management. And then you have a whole cultural work around getting people to understand what's changing, what's not changing. Then you have to implement things. All of this is costs, let alone the technology itself. People forget about the organizational systemic costs with managing digital strategies. It requires people in the legal department. It requires, people sometimes with regulatory experience. You need the SMEs for a particular vertical that you might be launching the technology in. I mean, it's huge. It's a huge cost. And if you haven't factored in your threats, your opportunities in the right way, you may start to get out of pocket and not deliver on goals that you hoped it would enable around your business strategy. So it's a serious thing for me. Planning is key, and ensuring that you have thought about the long-term roadmap, not just the initial impact of delivering your digital strategy, but all the things that you didn't think about. And it's basic business planning, and sometimes people get so wrapped up in the technology itself that they forget about the more traditional business planning capabilities and skills that you need around that.
Marcelo, what would you add?
Yeah, totally agree. I think really thinking about your target operating model, as you think of the technology and technology being one aspect of that, I think that's absolutely critical. I would argue, James, certainly within professional services and fintech, you know what, if you don't drive digital, you are going to become irrelevant. This is what our customers are looking for. It is an expectation. It's just no longer a nice thing to have. That's absolutely what they expect. And I think, certainly our experience right now looking for talent, it's the same within talent. When they come in, if they don't have the right tech, if they don't have the right digital space, before you know, they leave. And quite fascinating looking across all markets, right? APAC, huge expectation. Same in North America and arguably Europe the same. So I think, there's no other alternative within professional services and fintech. Is just the way forward, and it's got to be done. Otherwise, you become irrelevant.
Guys, already only have 5 minutes left, which is crazy given it feels like we started a minute ago. But this question about following up from that, about driving transformation and behavioral change, so we have the right people to navigate our digital strategy. Marcelo, you talked about behavioral change earlier. How do we deliver this in business?
Yeah, so I think, I'll go back to that target operating model. I think really visualize your future organization and absolutely imagine the role of technology within that future organization. What function is there to fulfill and how you then design around that. I think, we talked about that before, just chucking a kit at your people, it's not going to stick. So I think, certainly the most impressive leaders that I've worked with are the ones that are thinking people, process, technology, and that's just how they imagine their organization. So I think that is an absolute must. I think the other aspect of it, from a client perspective, what is it that we're selling? And are you creating a toolkit for your clients that is appealing and that distinguishes yourself, in the market? Because actually, if you are doing that externally, that will have a huge impact internally in terms of adoption as well. And I think, the final thought would be, I'm a big believer that great organizations, they have absolutely clarity onto the 2 to 3 key capabilities that distinguish them. For me, technology, digital, and automation is an absolute critical capability that as an organization, you need to drive, and then needs to be embedded in all aspects of your employee experience, from attraction to development, to promotion and all the rest.
Syreeta?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Marcelo's just said. And I think that points to a key point, that he and I are coming from 2 different perspectives, but are very aligned. The world of digital doesn't have the delineations around disciplines and functions that the old model had. That's really important. It doesn't see those lines. It's almost boundaryless around that, the operating environment. It's its own force, really. I would say the culture transformation and behavioral aspect is, for me, the most important part. And James, I've said this before in other talks. If people haven't got their strategy right around the target operating model, the resulting behavioral and culture transformation that's going to be required, you've stopped before you started. And also the other thing I would say is making it seamless for people. I have my 70-year-old dad. He's on social media more than I am. And 3 years ago, he wouldn't even know how to pick up a digital technology. And it's annoying me now. I feel like I'm the person. He's like, it's now making your organization understand that what it does at home, it's doing in the workplace. And I think the companies that get people in their organizations to create that seamless understanding with their employees and their people around how they operate in their home life is how they're operating in their work life, can get that acceleration of adoption and understanding a lot quicker. It's a fallacy to say, oh, you've got people who don't engage with technology. Well, they'll buy something on Amazon though, so they do engage with technology. You just need to translate that for them in the workplace.
Fantastic. And in the final minute of this session, just would like to close with just a thought maybe from both of you about what's the one thing that we need to think about in 2022 if we were going to prioritize in digital as part of our strategy that we've got to nail. Give you a second to sort of pause and think about that, and then I'm going to come to Marcelo.
So for me is digital going side by side with culture and capability.
Yeah,
clear.
And not to repeat what Marcelo just said, because that's what I would say, but I would actually add a very boring statement, but prioritization. So you have to be completely laser focused about what you're going to be able to do in order to do exactly what Marcelo's just talked about, because it takes a lot of effort, a lot of resources, and a lot of capacity. So what are you prioritizing in your strategy? Because there's some things that are going to have to stop in order to be able to get exactly that outcome.
Syreeta Brown, Marcelo, Borges, you've been amazing. Thank you very much for taking part in the conference today.
This podcast was brought to you by Annapurna Erupt. If you enjoyed this episode, please visit our Go Erupt website to get involved in our regular podcasts, video footage, and live events throughout the year. Thank you for listening.